Good morning, everyone. We are excited to have everybody again with us for the HR Supervisor training. So I don't know that this will help, but for those of you out in video land, I guess this doesn't make sense. If you can't see me, you can't hear me. So I was going to say refresh, but that doesn't make sense. But let me just run through the housekeeping real quickly. So if you're in video land, if you have a question or a comment or there's a problem with any of the technology, please send that to Michelle Campbell, and we'll take care of that. If you're here in the room, if you have a question, raise your hand. We'll bring the mic to you. Apart from that, we're going to turn the time over to Bart. Today we're going to discuss performance management and employee development. All right.
All right. Was that tricky or what? I was hiding behind Lance, and that was the big reveal when he left. We're excited to be here today, and before we get started, a couple of things I wanted to say just on the outset as we get into performance management and employee development. Number one, if you were here at Leadership Conference in September, I think it was the end of September, we talked a little bit about this, but we also, just the day before, vetted through some of this training with the division directors and the deputy directors, and got a lot of great feedback from them. And because of that, there's a lot of different content. We really revamped this based on their feedback, and so I think you'll find that there's a lot different things, and we go in a lot more depth. We were really limited on time at Leadership Conference, and today we've got 2 hours. We're going to spend all of it. I'm just kidding. No, but we're going to get a lot more in depth on this, and so I think this will be valuable to you. And just one thing to point out, I think we may have mentioned it right at the beginning, the first in this series of training, but all of these trainings we took to management and vetted through all of this to make sure everyone was on the same page. I think it was a really useful exercise, and the feedback that we got from that was really helpful. So hopefully this really applies to you and your positions, the jobs that you're having to do, and fielding all of the DWS specific things that go on here. So that's what we're aiming to do through this training today. So let's go ahead and get started. On our agenda today, we're going to talk about managing and steering, a culture of steering and development, how we get there, and we'll also go through a tutorial of UPM so that you understand a little bit more how to use those. I think there's going to be tools that I know that in DWS are not used very much at all, so that should be educational for just about everyone, whether you've been a supervisor for a long time or whether you're brand new. So looking forward to sharing some of those things with you. So I want to ask, I think there's some people in here, a lot of folks here in the live studio audience have been supervising for a long time, but think back to when you first accepted a leadership position in the department. Were you surprised at the amount of time you suddenly had to spend putting out fires? Okay, I'm seeing some heads nod. So that's something that I think when people first get into that position, you have this vision of what supervision's going to be, and then you start, and a few weeks in, you're just like, man, I had no idea I'd be doing so much of this putting out fires. It's surprising to a lot of people. So if you've felt that way, you're not alone. This is really common. We know that putting out fires, managing those types of situations, this is part of the territory of supervision. It's not something that you can avoid, but there are definitely ways, methods that you can implement to make sure that you're not spending all of your time as a supervisor just managing the fires. So for purposes of today's training, we're going to refer to the firefighting piece of supervision as management. These aren't magic words. Don't think that I think that managing is a bad thing or anything like that. This is just for purposes of today's training. And then we'll refer to the vision setting and positive culture creating type of work as steering. So that's how we'll differentiate those two things during today's training. As we've dealt with management in DWS, I think a really common theme that we see, and we hear this from supervisors often, that they have to spend a lot of their time. I think this probably, there's nothing scientific. I didn't put an Excel spreadsheet together and survey a bunch of people, but this seems to be a really common time split, way supervisors spend their time. It's a lot more focused on putting out the fires. They have to spend a lot of time there. And again, this doesn't mean that we think you should eliminate that. You can't avoid that. That's part of a supervisor's job. But can we tip the scales in the opposite direction? How do we try to make it so that we don't have to spend so much of our time and the majority of most of every day putting out fires? Well, the first step is to maximize the effectiveness of the time that you do have to spend managing. So here's some suggestions. First off is to respond promptly. If we use that firefighting kind of metaphor in this, if you've got a fire that's going and you think to yourself, maybe I'll wait for a little while and see if it goes out on its own, what's going to happen to the fire? In most cases, it gets bigger, right? It starts to spread. So this is a really important thing. There was something out in the studio audience, a sneeze or something. Pardon, just kidding you. But yeah, if you let it fester, it's going to spread. It's going to get bigger. So respond promptly. Be calm and neutral. Again, using the fire analogy. I think responding calmly and with neutrality is going to be the water in your tools to stop this fire. If you respond with a lot of drama and immediately jumping to conclusions and assuming guilt on one party or the other, that's the type of thing that's like throwing gas on the fire. So be sure to respond as calmly and neutrally as you possibly can as things come up. Also, this is a really important point, keep everyone informed. Usually you know those folks in your line of management where if they're not informed, it can be problematic. So we just advise you to make sure that the right people are in the know as things progress. Sometimes this can add fuel to the fire if the right people are not in the know. So we just encourage you to keep everyone informed as those things come about. And then one other important thing, make sure you have all of the facts before you act. So you might start to see a little fire over here develop and maybe there's some indication that here's where it started and it might have been this person or this set of circumstances that led to it. That's just fine, but make sure that you take a minute or a day or two, whatever time it takes to really gather all the facts and make sure you know everything that's at play before you decide to make an action. All right, specifically relating to performance management. As you see performance issues develop, once again, those issues need to be addressed immediately rather than wait a long time. Supervisors need to cultivate constant feedback, a culture of constant feedback and transparency. If that is not the culture that exists on your team right now, I would encourage you to take some steps to start to resolve that. And as performance issues come up, it might be surprising to your staff right at first, but start to address them immediately rather than waiting for some time to pass and things to go on before you actually get to addressing those performance issues. I think what you'll find is that your staff really appreciate the fact that they know exactly where they stand and that they don't have to be involved in this guessing game and wonder until it's an official performance evaluation or maybe even a monthly sit down or something like that. Something comes up, performance needs to be addressed right then. Also, ask more questions to understand the situation. We've seen supervisors get into this situation where they assume that something's going on and that this is the reason why, or so-and-so is the culprit. And what they've done is assume a little bit too much in that situation when just 3 or 4 more questions, maybe from the employee who's exhibiting performance issues or from those that are around them, colleagues or something like that, just a few more questions really would have uncovered the real reasons, underlying reasons behind why they're seeing what they're seeing. And then evaluate if you've provided all of the necessary resources and tools that are available to you and available to the employee. Sometimes we've had situations where supervisors will come and want to address things, and we get to a point where we realize that either inadequate training has been given, or there hasn't been enough explanation about what expectations were, or there were certain things that can kind of mentor or guide a person along that were never offered. So just evaluate, as a supervisor, have I given them everything I possibly could to help them perform? This doesn't mean you need to bend over backwards and give them things that nobody else gets, but you definitely need to evaluate, have I made sure that I've given or made available all the resources that employees usually receive to understand what they're supposed to do and to have the tools to do their job. Finally, come to HR and to others, maybe in your chain of management, for resources. There might be things that we have to offer you that can help a situation, or that others in management, maybe they've seen some of the same problems happen, they've had experience with that, they've got some resources and tools. Use your network of other supervisors and managers, division directors in the agency as resources to you that can help you. All right, so specifically the process. I think this tends to be a lot less complicated than people tend to think that it is. So we're going to go through this process really quick, and this isn't necessarily an in order, has to be step-by-step type of thing, but if you've got all of these elements present as you're addressing situations relating to performance, you're a lot more likely to have success. So first of all, state the expectation. If when you're having a conversation, all you're doing is saying, here's the problem, but the employee doesn't really have clear in that conversation. So wait a minute, what's my expectation? That can really muddy the waters. So make sure that you've stated the expectation clearly. Also, I've found it helpful to ask if the employee is aware of the expectation. Now, in an ideal world, they should be, because they've received a performance plan, or you've given them training, they've been through training on these things before, but it can help steer the conversation where you need to go based on their response. If they say that they weren't aware, you might want to go into a little bit more detail about what that expectation was. If they say they were aware of it, then you might want to ask them, well, if you were aware, what are the reasons that led to you not performing up to expectations? That can really help. State the observed performance, and then clearly explain the gap. So we expect you to perform here. This is what you were doing. This is why there's a gap between the expectation and what you actually did today or this week. Then restate the expectation, encourage the employee. Make sure that they understand you believe in them, you think that they can do what they're expected. That can really help things end on a positive note. And finally, document what happened in the conversation. This might be a follow-up email to the employee saying, we met today and these are the things that we talked about. It might be a note in UPM in their performance notes, which we'll get to that, how you do that in just a few minutes. It might be just some cuff notes that you keep either hard copy in a secure drawer or in a secure file on your computer. Make sure, though, that you know what your division management expects of you on this. There are sometimes expectations division-wide that these types of conversations are documented in a certain way. Make sure that you understand what those expectations are, but there are definitely some options agency-wide. Okay, I wanted to get into a couple of scenarios. So we're going to talk about, there's 4 scenarios that I have here. We're going to talk through the first couple of scenarios, and then I've asked Murris and also Brent to come up and role play a little bit with me today. I'm going to be the one on the spot, so I'm going to be the supervisor that can mess things up, and we'll talk about how I messed up and what things I can do to improve. So no one here other than me is on the spot and needs to worry about, messing things up. But I promise I'll mess things up. Just because I'm not perfect at this. These are things that I think all of us as supervisors can improve on. In fact, I'd bet you that some of the things that we talk about today, my staff are sitting here and thinking, yeah, he could improve, he could do that a little bit better, I'm just saying. So just freely acknowledge that. But we'll talk through these first couple of scenarios and then we'll do role play for the next two. So the first one, once again, I've made sure to use names that do not exist in the department so that no one thinks that I'm describing someone here. So Lila Sue. She's an office technician on your team. She's worked in that position for 3 years without any significant problems. One of the elements in her performance plan is to respond to email requests within 1 business day. Today, you receive a complaint that Lila Sue is untimely responding to requests via email. So let's see, where's the microphone? Okay, Chris has got the microphone. Let's talk through what are the things that you as a supervisor, put yourself in this situation, what are the things that you want to do as you've seen, as you receive this request? Someone's telling you she's taking a long time to get back to them when they send email requests. What do you need to do?
We'll get some details and some examples from the person that's reporting it, so you gather the information and facts. Okay.
So what kind of questions might you think about asking her?
How many emails, what the dates and times of the emails were that were slow to be responded to.
Okay, good, great.
Maybe even see if they were, complicated ones or what the nature of them were.
Right, because there might be some context behind that helps make a lot more sense of the situation, right? Great, thank you. Now, are these questions that you'd want to ask just to Lila Sue, or?
When I meant the person.
Sorry, wait just a second.
I thought we'd ask those questions first to the person that reported the problem.
Okay, great, good. Then you're gathering good facts that way, great. What other questions might you consider asking either from the person that sent the complaint or of the employee? What kind of things do you want to know?
The other side.
We say it one more time.
Well, the other side, as he was saying, you're going to first, when someone comes to you and says, something's going on here, you don't go blazing into your employee and demand answers. You get the information and the examples so that when you can go to them, you can ask them in a polite way. That it's come to my attention that there's a delay on responding to emails and everything. Let's talk about this and give them an opportunity to respond, but in such a way that you're not attacking them and just saying, I'm just here to, we want to perform well and we want to be responsive to our customers, and so if there's a problem in the process, then I want to find out a solution, and so let's talk about it that way. And so really talk about her being part of the process as opposed to being a problem.
Okay, great. I really like the way you said that. Did you notice that the way she worded that was, it's come to my attention that you're responding to email requests untimely. Did that accuse the employee? Not necessarily, right? It's come to my attention, so she's not saying, you're not doing a good job. She's saying, this has come to my attention. Is that true? That's a fact. She's just stating the facts. Did she stay calm and neutral? Yeah, she's staying calm and neutral if she asks a question that way. So I really like the way you worded that question. Good. Anything else that you want to do as part of that conversation with Lila Sue? So you've asked some questions. You know, it's come to my attention that you're responding untimely. Maybe you get some answers from her. What else do you want to do as part of that conversation? Right over here.
You want to restate what the expectations were and see if she was aware of that, see what her understanding of her performance was.
Okay, great. So how would you word that if you were talking to her?
So we became aware that it's been 2 or 3 days since these emails. What was your understanding of how quickly we ought to respond to those? Okay. So then if she responds, gosh, I can't remember. I know I'm supposed to be pretty timely. It was a good teaching moment. So as a reminder, our standard is to respond to those within 1 day.
Okay, yeah. Yep, exactly.
Clarify.
So just stating the expectation. Great. Very good. Let's talk through another one. So on this one, you notice that an unemployment insurance claims specialist, Danny Michelle, is not following... Hey, are you laughing? Is not following established telephone protocols when working with the customer on the phone this morning. We've got some folks from UI here today. Maybe you have seen that. So let's talk through how would we want to handle this. What's the first thing that we want to do? Doesn't have to be UI that responds to this, but it could. Does anyone have any Jeopardy theme music to play? Mike, I can tell you got something to say.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Well, like you've taught us, just meet with them and restate the expectation. I don't work in the claim center, so we'd have to defer to somebody on the 4th floor for that. But just ask them if they understand what the expectation is, and maybe share with them your observations or the observations that have been reported to you, and just ask for what's going on, what can we help you with. Maybe you'll gain some insight as to why they're not meeting those protocols. Perhaps something is on their mind in their personal life and they just need a quick time out to regroup, and then they can get back on it and better engage with the customer.
Okay, good. Are there any specific questions you can think of that would probably be helpful to ask as you're trying to figure out what's going on here? What are some specific questions? And you don't have to be from UI. This is just, anyone putting yourselves in those shoes. What kind of specific questions would you want to ask? What's her name? Danny Michelle, as you sit down and have that conversation with her. Mark?
You probably want to find out if she understands what the protocols are. And you'd want to probably let her know which one or what you observed were the wrong protocols, but is she aware of them, and can she state them back as to what is expected of her in that respect?
Okay, great. All right, let's get to, we're going to get to Bill E. Bob. Billy Bob. Billy Bob's an ESD. Excuse me. I need a drink apparently. Just one second. Oh, much better. Okay. Billy Bob's an eligibility specialist on your team. And we're going to have Billy Bob come up. Billy Bob is Murris. So Murris and I are going to role play here for just a minute. And the scenario is this. Why don't I come right here? Scenario is this. So I'm the supervisor. One of his coworkers has informed me that his EREP notes are often inadequate. So as a supervisor, I take the information, I check into it, spot check some of the cases, and I see that, he does seem to be a minimalist on his documentation in his cases. So we're going to role play here, and for purposes of time, I really don't want to take the full 2 hours today. For purposes of time, we're going to assume that as a supervisor, I've I've sat down with them. We've done kind of the initial ice breaking, small talk type of things, and now we're to the point in the conversation of cutting to the chase. So we'll go ahead and go from there, okay? I'm going to call you Murris, not
Please.
Billy Bob.
Yeah, I prefer that.
So Murris, I had some information come to me that you were having a difficult time being as complete as you need to be in your case documentation. When that information came to me, I just did some spot checking on some of your cases, and what I found was that there were some of those cases that I couldn't really tell what was going on or where you'd received your information or the things that were happening. Can you tell me about?
Yeah. Was it abbreviations that concerned you, or overall the lack of detail in my notes?
The abbreviations weren't as concerning because most of those abbreviations I could tell what they meant, and it was just fine. But it was more the lack of core content. I couldn't really tell in some cases what had happened and where the information had come from, and just the nexus of why you took some actions on the case.
Okay. Is this something that you've noticed recently, or has it been ongoing for a while?
Like I say, I just got that information recently, and so I've just spot checked a few cases. So they were recent cases, but in just about all of them, I found that documentation was.
The reason I ask, and I just want to share this with you, as you're well aware, my numbers with phones were kind of low. And what I try to do is I try to increase the number of phone calls that I handle every single time when I'm on a phone shift, in order to increase that number and not have an issue in terms of the volume of calls that I handle. So as a strategy, I've been going around and I've been asking people, so what do you do? How do you increase those numbers? And a coworker suggested I could possibly cut some corners on my notes, make those notes shorter so I can handle the higher number of calls. And the reason I asked is if it's been going on for a while. I've just been doing this for the last 2 weeks, and I just wanted to make sure if my notes prior to that were adequate, and it's an issue right now.
Oh, I see. So this is something that you've just been doing for a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. And you say you got information from someone else, that maybe a suggestion from another worker that's what they've been doing?
Well, my numbers on phones being low, I've went around and asked some of my colleagues and said, hey, do you have any ideas how I can get these up? And people have suggested, don't spend so much time writing your notes.
Okay. So do you know how many people have you heard from that they're trying to kind of cut corners
Just
on?
one, really, because other people have told me, other ideas, and that's the one that actually made sense.
Okay, all right. Do you understand that the expectation for your documentation is that if I were to pick up a case, even a couple of years down the road, and figure out what happened, even years in the past, that I need to understand as the worker picking up that case exactly what happened, why the actions were taken on that case?
Yeah, and I kind of figured that. I just figured it was a higher priority for me to get my phone numbers up.
Okay. All right. Well, I understand that, and I appreciate that you're looking at all the different options that you have to make sure that your volume is up. But we do expect you to make sure that your documentation is such that anyone at any time can pick that case up and know exactly why you took the action on that case.
You make a good point, because there was one I made a note last week. In 10 seconds, I was like, well, I hope I don't pick this case up because I don't even know what I've done. So yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Well, you've done a great job in the past. I haven't seen a problem with your cases in the past, and so it makes sense that if that's what's happened, that's the reason why. I know you can do a great job, but okay. I do need you to adhere to that expectation.
Yeah, I'll make sure my notes are a little bit more detailed from this point on. Would it be okay if I try to still keep my notes timely and maybe have you review a couple of them and tell me if that's sufficient in terms of how I'm doing it? Or do you want me to just take the time and thoroughly explain that and seek out other ways to increase my phone numbers?
No, I think it'd be great. I'd be very willing to do that with you.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. Thanks, Maurice.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see, Chris, do we? So let's talk about the scenario now. Usually, are your employees as awesome as Maurice? I saw there wasn't even hesitation in that head shaking. But Maurice was a little bit, he had an explanation. Was his explanation okay? So I could say, oh, well, that makes sense, and go ahead and keep doing that? No, right? So still stated the expectation and made sure that he would adhere to that. But let's talk through some of the things that happened there. What were some things that went well? What are some things that could be improved? Krista?
I think that you could have done a better job of saying, I appreciate your efforts in trying to increase your numbers, and I can see that you are in a difficult position of more work, and you're caught between accuracy and completeness and your numbers, and so you're trying to find that balance. So thank you for trying to do that, and let me help you and tell you that the priority is going to always be completeness. If you have to err on one side or the other, but thanks for letting me know the challenges that you have. And so I think letting him know that, wow, I can see you're trying to have excellent numbers, but it's just not, in this case, it's just not going to work.
Okay, great feedback, because it really is kind of a tough balance for our workers a lot of times, isn't it? They've got so many different things that they've got to make sure that the measures are right on. And so a little bit more of a statement of what we can see that they're doing can help that conversation be more encouraging, right? Very good. Good. What other things did you see? Brad?
I thought it was interesting. He was trying to solve one problem and creating another. It might have been, after addressing one problem, to then go in and address the next one, which is his ability to keep up with the workload that he's supposed to keep up with, and what strategies he can attack to address that instead of focusing on his notes. Maybe there's another area where he can focus that would help him, and maybe cover those strategies with him.
Very good. Yeah, there might be ways that he can. So maybe even offering some additional suggestions of things that he can do to keep his calls up, so that he doesn't have to cut corners on notes. Okay, good.
And sometimes it's good to try to find out who told you that, or how many people told you that, so you can see if it's widespread. Sometimes that gets off the conversation, and maybe they don't want to reveal who, tattletale on something.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great suggestion. When I asked, how many people had he heard this from, he said that he'd heard it from one person. Does that mean there's really only one other person that's told him that? Maybe, but maybe he's a little bit afraid. Maybe I want to check around with some other supervisors and see, is this something that a lot of people are trying to do? Because maybe we can head some problems off before they escalate. Okay, great. Jimmy had a comment, I think.
I liked one of the good things I thought you did is when you wrapped it up, you didn't leave any ambiguity towards the time frame that you said, hey, I've never had this problem before. It makes sense. Because oftentimes as supervisors, sometimes if we address a problem and we leave them kind of hanging and wondering, wow, has this always been a problem? Or how long has this been going on? Is he trying to, that gotcha thing? So you left it, you said, hey, I haven't seen a problem in the past. This makes sense that you're trying to do this. So I think it's good to, relieve that worker that, hey, this is just something recent that I've noticed, instead of leaving them hanging on, oh, wow, how long has this been going on type thing. So
Yeah, good.
I thought that was good.
Well, thank you. Something that just hit me too is that, actually my mind just went blank. It just left me. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Is that it's gone. Oh well. There's one other thing that I think could it just came back. If at the very end, I did state that, this is the expectation, but I could have probably been even more clear that as far as time frame, from here on out, I'm not giving you a week to sort of get back up to speed. I know you can do this, and so from here on out, we need to make sure that case documentation is adequate. So, good. Any other comments before we move on? All right, and Video Land, you've been disappointing me the last couple of weeks. We're not getting very many questions from you guys. So if you have questions, please send Michelle Campbell an email, questions or comments, an IM, and she'll wave her hand and let me know. So let's move on to the next scenario. Yeah.
We're going to take like a 3-minute technical intermission.
Okay.
So you can get your computer going again.
Oh, okay. So 3-minute technical intermission.
So just hang tight. Yeah. All right, welcome back everyone. Sorry about that. We had a slight technical problem, but we're ready to get going again. So just shoot us any questions, comments, or if you have any issues, just let us know. Send those to Michelle Campbell.
Okay, thanks a bunch, Lance. All right, let's go to the next scenario. So this one is going to be a WDD. So I'll have, I've got Craig on here, and Brent Noreen is going to be Craig. So I promise I'll call you Brent. But when helping customers on the connection team, you observe Craig not being very proactive with customers. He stays seated when customers enter the building and only gives assistance when directly asked by a customer. So this is going to be the scenario that we're dealing with on this one, and Brent's going to be Craig. So here we go. Brent, I'm extremely disappointed. I'm just kidding. I'm not. Take two. And once again, we're assuming that for time's sake that we've already kind of done some of the initial small talk. All right, Brent, appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with me today. The reason I wanted to talk with you is because I noticed that this morning you, as customers entered the building, you were sitting in your seat, you weren't standing up and helping them and being very proactive with them unless you were directly asked. Can you tell me about what's the reasons behind that? What's happening?
Well, first, Bart, I apologize for being a little late to work this morning. I've just got a lot going on, and usually, I'm at my workstation right when I'm supposed to be. And I have helped a couple customers already this morning, and it's only like 9:30.
That's true. You did help some customers this morning, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your help with them. The expectation on the connections team is as customers come in, a lot of them might not be very comfortable even coming in the first place. They're not sure where they're supposed to go. Might be the first time they've come. They might be struggling with some things, circumstances at home, and so that's why the expectation of the team is to be very proactive. We want to help them get to the solutions that they need as quickly as possible, rather than waiting for them to kind of try to figure out where they need to go, what they need to do. So that's not the behavior that I observed from you this morning. Can you tell me why that is?
Well, I'll be upfront with you. I do have a few issues going on at home, and maybe I brought that to work with me this morning, and I've been just contemplating a little bit about maybe how to resolve that, and maybe not staying focused with what I should be doing in the job. So I do acknowledge that.
Okay, well that makes some sense. I'm sorry to hear that there's anything difficult going on at home, but it makes sense to explain why we've seen something different from you, and usually I don't see that from you. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it. There's probably a couple of options that I can think of just right off the top of my head. What if you took a few minutes and just went outside, walk around, and just kind of clear your head and come back in a few minutes ready to go and ready to be as proactive as you can with customers. The other option I can think of is we've got a couple of projects going on the team that I could really use some help with, and even if I had you do some of those things for a couple of hours this morning where you don't have to deal with customers, but you're still helping me meet some project deadlines, and then after lunch you could get back into what we need you to do on the connections team, kind of refreshed and having some time to clear your head. Which one of those sounds better to you?
Well, I appreciate your consideration, Bart. I really do. You know how much I enjoy really working up front, and doing this job. Maybe if I could take just an earlier lunch today, I do need to make a couple phone calls to resolve some issues, that are going on. Is that something
Denied.
I can't do that?
Just kidding. Okay, so an earlier lunch and
may help. Okay.
You don't think you need to be away from, you think you can get in there and be proactive right away as long as you know that you're looking forward to an earlier lunch?
Well, I think I can, and you bringing this to my attention has really helped refocus me on why I'm here and the things I should be doing, and customers that are coming in, they deserve the very best in customer service. So
okay.
This has been very helpful.
Well, I'm okay with that. Why don't you take an earlier lunch, but as you go back out and work with folks on the connections team for the rest of the morning and throughout the day today, I need to see that proactive nature that you usually exhibit with our customers, okay?
You got it.
All right, great.
Hey, thanks you so much.
All right, thanks, Brent. Okay, so in that role play, let me just move these back over. But in that role play, what did we see that went well and what could be improved as we're talking about performance management, some of the things that we've talked about? What did you see go well? What could be improved? Mike?
I like how you had some ideas, some suggestions of ways to help Brent re-engage. But you notice he didn't take either one of those. He had a third option, and you were flexible enough to roll with that. and it's going to work out, apparently. So I like the flexibility.
Great. Now, in the real world, I mean, this was a third option that as a supervisor, I really would be okay with. Do you find sometimes that employees will give you an option that you're not okay with? So what do you do in that situation? We should have talked about that before. I should have had you give an option that I was like, not feeling the love right there. But what do you do in a situation like that? Maurice?
Well, I think you need to be fair and tell them that your opinion is that the option they suggested will not work. And these are the reasons why you think it would not work. So you also need to let them know that you're open to listening to other suggestions, but what they suggested at that point, it will not provide a resolution in your mind, and let's stick with the options that you have given them unless we come up with something else.
Okay, yeah. I really think you need to be that upfront with them and not let them just establish on their own the terms that they're going to do to perform their job. You're the one that sets the expectations, and if you can think of various options, great. It'll help the employee not feel like that they're just being told what to do and caged into just one option. If they're given something that they can choose between, that can really help, but sometimes they'll offer another option that you're just not okay with, and it's okay as a supervisor to say, I'm not okay with that option, I am okay with these, and still allow them to choose. Good. Other observations of what went well or what could be improved? It's okay. My feelings do not get hurt, I promise. All right. Well, yeah.
I like the way that you are solution-oriented, always working towards a solution. But what level I kind of think, would we want to know, what's going on at home? Let them know that we care and give them a chance to vent more detail about what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. And would that have helped Brent? I know this was a made-up situation, but would that have helped Brent feel like I care about what he's doing at work, care about him as a person more, if I had asked a few more questions about that? I think so, yeah. Not that I necessarily need to get really into the details of personal life, but so you have to figure out a way to walk that line. Dale?
Yeah, I'm going to be the bad guy here because personally I probably wouldn't want to know what's going on at home. And I know that might sound cold. I mean, I think it was great that you said, I'm really sorry you're going through some things. But I guess from my perspective, if you allow that to enter the conversation, it can muddy the waters. And so typically what I would do is say, I'm really sorry. Here's some options. Take a timeout, or, here's some resources for the employee assistance program. But when you're at work, I need you to do your job.
You know what, that's a really good point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. It reminds me of a phrase that I've heard recently that I really like, that is, let correct principles and not emotion govern our behavior, which there's some real value to that. And the more that we get into someone's, the personal details that are going on in someone's life, I think the more emotion can get in and start driving the actions. So I think it's going to be situational based, case by case, but keep that in mind. You want your employee to understand that you care about them as a person, definitely, but make sure you're really careful about walking that line between getting too personal. So, good point, Dale. All right, any other comments before we move on? Great discussion so far, so I appreciate that. All right. So let's talk about how we spend more time steering things in the right direction, and what that looks like. So we've talked quite a bit about how we make sure we use our time effectively in the time that we have to spend managing. Now, how about steering? There's four ideas up here that I think might be helpful as you think about how you'll do that on your own as a supervisor or manager. First of all, invest in the relationship. if your employees understand that you are genuinely concerned about their growth and their potential, what they can do as an employee in the department, they'll respond a lot better to you. So investing in that relationship with them and not just talking about tasks and those type of production types of things with them, but what you see in their future and how you can get them there, investing in the relationship will always pay off. Also investing in the team. There's actually, you might be surprised to hear this, but there's actually a piece in UPM, a tool in UPM that you might be able to use to help invest in the team. We'll get into that in another few minutes, but as much as you can, invest not just in individuals on the team, but in the team as a whole, creating an environment where everyone feels like, hey, I'm a part of a team that we all work together. We have each other's backs. We really know what we're trying to accomplish as a team, and we do it together. It can really help as you try to steer things the right direction rather than just managing things that go wrong. I heard someone just a little bit before, I can't remember who it was, talk about teaching opportunities, and that's another one. As those opportunities come about, I think all too often supervisors, because of the busy nature of their work, will miss those teaching opportunities and not sit down with an employee to help them see how they might be able to use something that just happened to develop themselves and get even further along in career development. So use those teaching opportunities as they come to you, because they don't come all the time. They don't come every day, so don't let those teaching opportunities just go away. And then finally, this last point is something that I think supervisors, and this is me too, I'm talking about all of us, me too, we don't listen enough. And the more we listen, the more we'll learn. I think all too often we just want to make sure that we've said what we needed to say, that the employee understands, and that's important too. But let's listen a little bit more and talk a little bit less. Might help to really understand what's going on in the situation, how you can create the right culture and the right environment for your employees. Questions or comments on that? Okay. Another piece of feedback that, and I think this is really important, this is some information directly from the division directors. As I mentioned, we did this training and vetting up in Park City right before leadership conference. Balancing proper control. This can be sometimes a really fine line. How do you go between micromanaging your team and holding them accountable? You know, the term micromanagement has a really bad rap. Usually when you hear people say that, they're usually not saying it in positive terms, right? My boss is the best micromanager ever. You've probably not heard that. But how do you avoid micromanaging and yet still hold people accountable for the things that you're responsible to hold them accountable for? Before we get into some of the thoughts I have, I want to hear from you first. It's probably something that all of you have, at least at one point or another, tried to figure out that fine line. How do I hold people accountable and yet not just be in every little tiny detail and become obnoxious? Is this something that you've struggled with and you've learned some things from? How do you walk that line? Mike and then Dave? Dave first, actually. He's closer to the mic. It's good.
Excuse me. You know, one of the things that I've done is I try and at least let the team be part of the overall decision making where they're allowed to, where we have a team discussion, we know what the overall goal is and what can we do as a team to get to that goal. Once they've had a little bit of ownership into the process that we're going to use, then that also can then be used to hold them accountable for the overall goal. Because then you come back to them and say, this is what we agreed upon. This is what we said we were going to do as a team. You know, this is where we're going to move forward. And then they have to take accountability for that in themselves.
Great. Have you used that?
Yeah.
That's worked well for you? Great suggestion, Dave. Let's hear from Mike.
So recently a manager in unemployment insurance pulled together several teams and had each supervisor explain the federal requirements that they were expected to meet, the performance standards. And that was an effort to help answer the question, why? Why do they do what they do? And also I think it helped the team members understand why they were being, why their performance was being judged on those things. So I think that helps folks understand the difference between micromanagement versus accountability. You start at the basics. This is why we do what we do, and this is why your supervisor is going to be monitoring your performance on these areas or in these areas, so we can meet the bare minimum of federal expectations or your performance plan or whatever it might be. So I think answering the question why is a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a really great suggestion. Thanks, Mike. Do you think it's possible that even if you walk that line and you're just holding folks accountable, that you're not trying to control every detail of what they do, is there a chance that your employees will still perceive you as micromanaging? Yeah, and that's true. But there's definitely things that we can do to avoid that and getting down to too much detail. I was reading there's a bunch of different definitions of micromanagement, and I was reading a few of those, and even just trying to, there were some descriptions of symptoms of micromanagement that you might be cognizant of and try to avoid. But I have to tell you a funny story first. When we were first talking about this, when this first came up in our training with the division directors and deputy directors, Casey Cameron brought this up as a point to be made, and she said, recently I read this definition of micromanagement, and the definition that I read was when a manager delegates something to their staff and then ends up doing it all themselves. Well, so I'm just telling on myself, just a few days before, I had given one of my staff a project or a task to do, and that staff member happened to be present in the training I was giving with the division directors. I'd given her a task and realized that she hadn't had a whole lot of exposure to that, and I thought, I don't know if I gave really clear direction, so maybe I'll just do it. And so when I heard Casey describe that, I thought, great, I'm a micromanager. So I think it's important to recognize that we can all probably sometimes find ourselves suddenly realize that, man, I think I'm getting too much in the weeds, or maybe I've taken too much control over this. If you just are open to recognizing that, that's the first step, right? And you can take steps to correct that. Maurice?
I just wanted to make a comment and to your previous point about what is micromanagement and what is not. Micromanagement gets a bad name, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary. And what I consider sometimes micromanagement is managing the details that matter. So in my mind, if that's what you're doing and you're managing the details that matter, I don't know that micromanagement necessarily is a bad thing, although it might be seen as such.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, one of the definitions that I read of micromanagement was getting involved in all of the details, whether they're critical or not, and trying to control all of them. Now, someone in a supervisory position definitely does have to get into some of the details, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The important details, you got to be in the loop on that. If they're not important and staff can take some of their own liberties in how they get there, great. Those types of things you can definitely let go. So I think it's a matter of asking yourself, is the detail that I'm focusing on right now, is it one of those mission critical things that I really need to be aware of and I need to be steering in the right direction? Or is it something that maybe it's just a preference of mine and I need to let it go? So those types of things can definitely help out to make you not a micromanager. That doesn't mean that because you're holding people accountable for some of those mission critical details, they might still perceive you as a micromanager. That's okay. You've got to hold people accountable. But there are definitely some things that you can, as you move along, let go of and let folks take some liberties. So, good. Any other thoughts or comments, Dale?
I just think that oftentimes, maybe not at the frontline level, but as you get up to managers, assistant directors, and directors, is that we do people a disservice by not allowing them the opportunity to fail or make a mistake and learn from that. And if you micromanage people so strictly, you may miss the opportunity to be surprised at what somebody can actually succeed at, because you're holding them back. And you're definitely disallowing them the opportunity to learn a lesson from making a bad choice or making a mistake.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And if someone that you supervise makes a mistake, does that mean you as a supervisor have to own that mistake? I mean, and maybe you do, but is it going to hurt that bad? Is there still a positive from that? I think in many cases there is, and so appreciate that point, Dale. So as we move forward and you're thinking about the tasks that you have to hold folks accountable for, just keep all of that in mind. These are great suggestions that we've had in discussion today, and I think there's a lot that all of us can do to still hold people accountable and yet not get into the unnecessary micromanagement level. We talked about direction and autonomy in that meeting too. There are times when projects come, and in order for a mission critical project to be seen through all the way to the end, there are certain things you're going to have to give some pretty strict direction on. I always try to ask myself, and this would be a suggestion for you as well, are the things that I'm spelling out as expectations, are they absolutely necessary, or can some of this be left to staff to figure out how to manage on their own? It's interesting though, because sometimes staff are so used to having some of those details managed for them that if you give that to them, they're uncomfortable with it. Is that okay? Yeah, let them be uncomfortable with it. It'll help them in their own career and professional development. So also just try to, as you're moving forward, figure out that right balance. There's no secret magic recipe or formula to striking that balance. It is a matter of trial and error. But as you work on that as a supervisor, you'll get better and better on that. But just always be cognizant. Am I walking the right line between giving proper direction and giving too much autonomy? A few other ideas to create a culture of steering and development. There's the Certified Public Manager program that is out there for some staff in certain positions. That's going to be appropriate for others it's not, but those are some things for you to consider. Tuition reimbursement is definitely an option. It might be something that maybe staff are aware of, they've got in the back of their mind that it might be something that they can use, but you might have some specific ideas of things that could really benefit them, and if you come forward to them proactively and say, we could offer some reimbursement if you were to attend these courses or things like that, it might be something that is beneficial and helps create a positive morale on your team, and particularly with individual employees. Professional development workshops, Lance and I are going to be doing those here in the next few months. They'll be starting in about March or April. And as those come around, we plan on those happening periodically. And so encourage you to send employees to those if you're interested and if you think they benefit for some of those things. Also, I think it's important for a supervisor to help their employees take responsibility for their own development. There's definitely a lot that you can do as a supervisor, but I think one of the most important things you can do is help them to see they've got ownership in this. You can't come up with all of the ideas. You're going to come up with as many as you can, but they need to take ownership in their own development and come to you and say, here's where I want to be, here's where I am. We talked a little bit before about the gap between expectation and what we saw as performance. They can come to you with the same thing. Here's where I'm at, here's where I want to be. Help me know or help me find resources what's the term I'm looking for? to take that gap down. Reduce, thank you, to reduce that gap. There's a lot of things that can be done that way. And then frequently ask. I try to do this too. Am I steering or am I managing right now? Don't ask yourself this just once. Check in periodically and say, am I managing or am I steering? And if I'm doing too much managing and not enough steering, why? What are the reasons behind it? And try to fix those. Hopefully some of these suggestions can help turn that time split into a lot more steering and less managing. We've said before, you're not going to be able to totally avoid the management, the firefighting piece of supervision. It is just part of the territory. But there's definitely things you could do to minimize that. All right. You've probably seen this before. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we want to talk about the Utah Performance Management System. And here we have in front of us the performance cycle. It starts up at the top with plan, goes down to monitoring. So once you've given an employee their plan, they understand the expectations, you monitor their performance. And as you see things come up and you want to help them to grow, you go to the development piece. You can reward them for things that are going right, rate their performance, and then it goes back into planning. Now, just really quick, how often does this cycle happen?
Ongoing.
Thank you.
Constant.
If you were to say a year, I would have been, what? Didn't you go to leadership conference in the fall? So yeah, the stuff that happens in UPM, that official performance evaluation might only happen once a year, but this whole cycle should be ongoing. I'd like to just walk you through a few things in UPM, how you create a plan using a UPM template, creating a AAA. This stands for agreement. What's the first one? Acknowledgements, agreements, and do you guys remember? I should have known that before I got in here. There's another A, and we'll get to it.
Is it authorization?
Authorizations, thanks. Acknowledgements, agreements, and authorizations. Completing a performance review and using some of the bells and whistles that you might not be aware were in there. So I'm going to go over using some awesome technology. I think Jordan's going to be projecting this on Hangouts, right? Okay, so just pulling up one of my tabs. Okay, I'm logged into the training realm of UPM, so there's no production data in here. And I'm logged in as Jeff Arnold. I don't even know who he is. I think he's a DTS employee, or was. Anyway, to create a UPM plan, this is going to be the same thing for all supervisors. You're going to come up, and can you guys see this okay? Does it look okay on...
Control plus might make it bigger.
Or that?
That's better.
Is that better? Okay. All right, so everyone's going to have this tab up at the top, the Plans and Evaluations tab. So I'll just click on that, and I can see under there my list of all the employees that report to me. So it's really pretty straightforward. In order to create a plan, I just come into here. If I want to create a plan for Beth Gallegos, I'm just going to come in here and say Create Plan. It'll immediately come up defaulting to today's date. You can change this if you need to go back a little bit, but I want to talk about these dates for a minute because there's one of the most common questions we have, and there's some confusion around this, is if I get an employee and it's the middle of the year and they've just come to me, what dates do I use? How do I do that? What if they're probationary? So we're going to try and address those questions as we go along here. Let's assume Beth Gallegos is a long-time employee and she has just been transferred to me. So what I'm going to do is say, today's the effective date of the transfer, so I'm not going to go back. She had a performance plan under her previous supervisor, and that supervisor should rate that performance before they come to me. If not, get them in trouble. But they should rate that performance, and then they come to me. So I'm just going to say, this is a new plan. It's starting today, and it's going to go through the end of the performance year. So performance year goes to June 30th. So 06/30 of 2016. Now, purpose. You've got 4 options. There's annual, interim, performance improvement, and probation. Since Beth is not a probationary employee, she's long-term, which option am I going to choose? That's what most people would think is annual. Actually, it's going to be interim because this is a small segment of the performance year. I got her in the middle of the year, so this is going to be an interim performance plan. It doesn't cover the entire performance year. So I'm going to choose interim, and then I can copy from a template. Now these templates in here are the templates that were built in DTS. So I've also got another tab that I'll get to that in just a minute, that has all of the workforce services templates that are available to you. But you'll choose one of those templates and then just apply it to that person. Or I can also, if I'm in a division that doesn't use templates widespread throughout the division, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not going to copy from any of those templates. I'm just going to create a new plan from scratch. So I'll click on Create Plan. All right, that brings me into this draft performance plan for Beth. Some of this should be pretty straightforward as well. I'm just going to add some goals in here. So to make a new goal, I just hit that new goal button. I can title it and say something like customer service. And when will it be accomplished? You expect it to be completed between February 19th and June 30th. What will they accomplish? They'll be awesome. How will they accomplish it? This is an important thing. This is where you're going to explain not only what the expectation is, but how they should do it. Support needed for success. This is oftentimes, and it doesn't have to be, but oftentimes an opportunity for employees to engage in the plan that's being developed for them. So before the plan is activated, you might put a few goals in there, and don't put anything in support needed. Leave that blank and have those goals out there and have the employee go in and say, here's what I need to succeed at these goals. Once again, isn't something that's required, but it could be something that can help the employee feel a little bit more engaged or more bought into the plan that's being developed for them because they had a say in some of it. How will success be measured? This is an important one. It feels tedious sometimes. And that's why if you're in a division where templates are developed and those success measurements are already developed, you can avoid a lot of that tediousness. If you're on a team or a division where everyone's performance is pretty varied, their expectations are not the same from one person to another, even though it's tedious, spend time on this. Figure out how you're going to measure whether or not they succeeded on that goal or not. And if you need help, come to HR. We have some ideas. We've seen a lot of things, and we can probably help you with ways that you can measure those goals. But to have a goal and not have a measurement in there is a fairly useless goal. Okay? All right, once I've done that, success will be measured by a yardstick. Not really, but we'll save it, and if I close out of there, I can see that that goal has been entered and it's part of the performance plan. So once I've got a few goals in there, I'm ready to activate the plan. They don't really become responsible for the things that are in that plan until it's activated. So don't skip this step. Put your goals in there, make sure that they're all there, and then go ahead and activate that plan. Just hit the OK button. All changes to the goals at that point will be stored in history, so you hit OK, continue, and that is the performance plan. Any questions on that so far? Blaine? there we go.
So the disallow employee edits button, does this mean right now that you have disallowed them, or do you have to click that to disallow them? Does that make sense?
That means I have to click there to disallow edits. Now, once I've activated a plan, an employee could go in and edit some things, not everything, but that doesn't mean that it's just going to write over everything that was in there and you won't be able to see what was in there before. That was that pop-up that you saw before that says, if we activate this, then any changes made here will show up in history. So any changes, you as a supervisor would be notified that there was a change, and if you go in and look at that change, you're not okay with it, then you've got the option to change it back. But if you don't want to do that back and forth, you can click the button and say, once I've activated it, employee can't edit in there anymore.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Good. Any other questions on this so far? Okay. So at this point, the plan is ready for evaluation. Let's get to the evaluation piece here in just a minute. I want to go over to this other tab and show you the templates that are available for workforce services. I'm actually going to log in as the executive director so you can see this. All right, so now if I want to come in, I'm John, and I want to come in and create a new performance plan for an employee. Let's go in and, should we get the scoop on Casey's performance? I'm just kidding, we're not going to. We can create a plan, and down here under templates, these are all the templates that have been built for DWS employees. It's a pretty long list, and there's a lot of different templates that have been created. So you're going to want to make sure that you're selecting the right template based on division expectations. Those expectations can be different from division to division. But if I were in ESD, you can see that there are a number of templates that I can choose from. So ESD Eligibility Specialist for FY16, I could select that and say, okay, using that template, I want to create a plan. And of course, we're going to put the dates and purpose, but here's where I'm going to say it's going to be the ESD CSR, and that's what I'm going to use as a template that I'm applying to Casey. I'm not going to create this because Casey will actually get something and wonder why I'm giving her a weird performance plan. But those are the templates that you'll see as workforce services employees and workforce services supervisors. You'd be able to, if there's anything extra you need to add for a specific employee, you can use that and add some of those extra things for specific employees. Any questions on those templates? Okay. Let's talk about AAAs. How many of you have used those in the past? I didn't expect to see a lot of hands because I'm going to log out. Let's see. You're going to edit this out, right? Me searching around. Oh, there we go. It's so hard to see the button you're supposed to use when you're in front of people. Okay. Under AAAs. This AAA admin, if I come into agency templates, oh, you know what? I just realized I still do want to be logged in as John because I want you to see what proxies are available to you as workforce services employees. So I'm sorry about that. Bear with me for just a second. And okay, under John, shoot. It might be under me. Okay, I'm going to come in here to AAA agency templates, And yeah, that's how it was. I forgot. I'm going to come down here to Agency 600, Workforce Services, and these are the AAAs that are available in Workforce Services. There's only 2. So one of those acknowledgments or agreements that's available for you to use is a career mobility agreement. The other one is used just for new hires. It's the DWS Essential Training for New Hires. So as part of their training, they go in and certify or acknowledge that they've read all of the essential policies that a new hire needs to read, and that is captured in UPM. It's part of their performance management record that they've read. They acknowledge that they understand it. They acknowledge that they are held accountable for those policies. Because these are the only 2 that are available in Workforce Services, I was going to be really surprised to see any hands saying, yeah, I've used a bunch of this before, but this is something that you can use. And there are a number of things that you might want to use this for. If I come in here, because I have rights to create an acknowledgement or an agreement as an HR employee, I can create this for you to use as supervisors. So I can come in here and say, you know what, there's a bunch of these different global templates that we can use. Do we want to have an annual policy review? Do you want your employees to make sure that each year they've reviewed a certain policy and you've got in their performance management system the fact that they have and agree to it and understand that they're held accountable for it? That might be one thing that you might want to use a AAA for. Confidentiality of records is another. Code of conduct. We've got some performance standards that are generally part of, or I think they're professional expectations that are generally part of performance plans, a number of employees' performance plans. This might be one way to separate and say, you know what, performance goals I'm going to take strictly and apply to performance. Professional expectations might be something you'd consider to use in a AAA as a policy that they acknowledge, that they understand that those policies are something that they are expected to adhere to. Definitely that's not something that's required, but you might consider using something to that effect as you move on into the next performance year. So there's a number of different things that we can create for you. If there's something that's not already in here, but it's something that you have on your team or that maybe even division-wide that you'd really like all employees in the division to understand and acknowledge and roll out to the whole division, come to us and we can create something for you if it's not already in here. So that's probably a tool most of you either weren't aware of or haven't used for whatever reason. If that can be useful to you, we are all ears and want to help you with that. So any questions about the AAA and how it's used, what benefits you might gain from it, what the limitations are, anything like that? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
They're asking what ideas or suggestions do you have?
Sorry, can we get Krista to give you the mic?
They're asking what creative ideas or suggestions do you have to reward staff that are located in remote or rural offices?
Suggestions or ideas to reward staff in remote or rural offices? I don't think there are any. I'm just kidding. That's a good question. There are probably some things that can reward or motivate people really no matter what office they're in. What are some things that you supervisors here use already? And this might be something that they respond to on IM as well, Michelle. So out in Video Land, anything that you do that helps reward employees, whether you're in a rural office or not? What are some of those things that you've done to reward employees?
Other admin leave.
Okay, admin leave. And what criteria do you use to reward admin leave?
I'm in a good mood.
If you're in a good mood.
I'm in a good mood. I just think great customer service, going above and beyond, that, and that is something that's hard to measure, except when you get calls from customers saying, I really appreciate the work that so-and-so did, and she's very helpful, and that kind of thing. That's
Okay, great. So admin leave can be a great option. Non-cash awards can also be a great option for people that are exhibiting great performance. So remember that the admin leave, there's a cap on that. 40 hours, above 40 hours is a no-no, but you've got up to 40 hours that a supervisor can give of admin leave in a calendar year, or sorry, in a fiscal year. So those are some ideas. Any others? Okay, great. I hope that was helpful, and thanks for the question. All right. One last thing I wanted to show you. So we've gone over the AAAs. Let's go into an actual performance plan. And I'm going to pull up Armand as if I was creating a new performance plan for him this year. We'll say that this is going to be through 6/30/2016. Purpose, we'll call it interim. And I'm going to create this plan. All right. When I activate, up here at the top, right under the section where it says goals, it says show inactive goals, and it also says show agency or team goals. Have any of you clicked on that to see what's there? So if I go there, I can see that the team goals are to, this actually doesn't apply, so this is something that I'd want to edit. This is a goal that I set for my team when I was over the business intelligence team up at the admin office at State Capitol Building. And what those team goals can do is to help people understand how their team goals tie into the agency goals. Let me, just as a better way of illustration, log in here as, once more as John, because there do exist the agency goals in there. So I'm going to go in and proxy in. Okay, if I come in here to anyone's performance plan, Dale, can I use yours? All right, so we come in, and if you've ever complained that UPM isn't the most user-friendly system, I completely agree with you. I can't remember where it is, but I wanted to just show you that it's got DWS's, the four cornerstones show as the agency goals, and then for most teams, the team goals are blank. So this is something I really wanted to encourage you as supervisors to use. Think about, and you might even want to consider, just like Dave suggested, sitting down with your team and saying, what is it that we want to accomplish as a team? How do we want to get there? And if you decide as a team and then put those things, those goals into the team goals as in UPM, then when an employee goes in and sees their performance plan, they can see how their individual goals tie into team goals and how those team goals tie into the agency goals. So it really helps them to see this clear vision of these goals that I have on here aren't just because my supervisor wants to give me something to do. These should tie in, and they should be able to see how they tie into team goals that they were a part of helping to build, and how those tie into the four cornerstones that have been established at DWS. So it's another tool in UPM that I would encourage you to use. It can really help that individual performance plan have more meaning for that employee and not just be something that they have to get through. So those are some of the tools, bells and whistles that you can use in UPM that you may not have used before. I encourage you to get in there, play around, see what things make sense and what you might be able to incorporate that you have not incorporated before. You're probably going to have questions as you get into that. How to do it, what this means if I activate this, and how does it make it different with my employees. feel free to contact us and walk through some of those specifics. We are happy to help you on those things. All right, just to finish up then. Any questions that we have not yet addressed as part of the training today, but any questions that you want to ask about developing employees and managing their performance that haven't been asked yet? Are there any other questions from out in video land, Michelle? All right, well, thanks a bunch. I appreciate the volunteers that helped in scenario practice today. Appreciate all of the participation from our studio audits today. It was really helpful. And video land, thank you, whoever it was, for submitting a question, finally submitting one. Let's keep that progression moving upward. We sure appreciate that. And we'll see you next time.